If you are listening to this episode when it goes live, it is June here in Ontario. We are heading into summer break. I know many of the districts across the US are probably already on summer break. You may have been out for a couple of weeks already, but for here in Ontario, this topic today is completely top of mind because we are in the final stretch of the school year and students will be leaving for their extended holiday. We recently had a conversation about the length of breaks. You know, surprisingly, they range. It's like some districts have 8 weeks. We talked to a district recently, John. I think they had almost 12 weeks off, between the end of year and the start back up. And
sounds great.
When I heard about those 12 weeks, I was like, that does sound great. But then I thought, like what's the impact of a 12
sounds great for me. Sounds great for them.
Yeah. Well, and we have we have some friends down under, in Australia, New Zealand, for example, where their school year is a little bit different, where they do like shorter breaks, but throughout the year. And we know that the research suggests that that's actually likely a better fit for probably everyone. I think we all, as teachers, John used to call it the longest Sunday night ever, was like the night before August. The first day of school. Like August is that
for us, because we didn't start until after Labor Day. So when August hit, half your summer's over and you're like, August is the longest Sunday night ever.
Yeah. Well, and I think what makes this really relevant is, this idea when you talk about that district with 12 weeks off, it's fairly extreme that is a large chunk of time, whether you have 8 weeks, whether you have 12 weeks, it's a long chunk. And I think today what we're hoping to do is to dive into some ideas that we might be able to provide educators in order to empower their families to maybe cut back on some of that summer learning loss, as they call it, right? And I think really all it is being away for so long. I always used to say kids come back and it's like they format their brains over summer. And, I once taught the same group of kids back to back. And when they came back, they were saying things like, you never taught us that, or we never did that. And I'm like, I promise you we did, and it wasn't that long ago, but to them, it certainly is. So we're excited to dig in to some of these ideas.
Let's dig in for sure. But I think, you pointed out that there's certain school systems in here in Ontario, they're piloting different schools to kind of do this all year learning, where they're not taking, say, the 2 months off in the summer or the 9 weeks off in the summertime. They're taking, a week off in, say, October. And then all of a sudden maybe you have a longer holiday in December. And then, you're stretching out some of that same time period to make the equal kind of time off, time on to hit your, required number of days or hours in the classroom. But then, so that makes sense. That makes sense research-wise about learning in particular, but I don't know, what are your guys' thoughts specifically, like before we get into the specifics about like what to do to, say, limit learning loss if we do have the 9 to 12 weeks off? What are your thoughts on like saying, like the people that say like kids need a break from school? Like what do we do? Like they need not only a break from school, they need a break like just to like pull back and do this thing over here, or they need to like experience these other pieces of life like in a different way. Like there are people, I think, that argue that side of things. And before we say jump into the let's make sure that we keep learning going at some point in our families, how do we want to address that before jumping there?
That's a tough question. I mean, I think that's
why I tossed it at you.
Yeah,
guys.
It's a great question. I think
that's why you asked it and didn't answer it.
I think that we also know that concentrating the break to one part of the year creates long stretches throughout the rest of the year where we do get a lot of fatigue and we get, disengagement. So, I mean, I haven't done extensive research on the full year calendar and the advantages. I mean, I definitely believe they exist. I guess what I will say, though, is having the summer off sounds ideal when you maybe have caregivers who are available for you and who are creating those, summer experiences that we picture depicted in movies.
Right.
But the reality is you might have 2 working parents. So you're actually now in camp all summer anyway, which may or may not be, the ideal outcome for all students. Or, we being privileged don't understand maybe how challenging it could be and like the food insecurity of an extended 9-week break for many families, or the stress level for parents to be the full-time caregiver for children if they have, they're struggling with their own mental health. So again, I don't know the full research on this. If I could wave my magic wand, we would all go to a full year school year calendar with extended breaks throughout the year. I don't know that we need 9 weeks. I think 3 or 4 weeks would be amazing, but I would love, a longer break in the fall or a longer break in the spring to break up those big stretches of continuous learning.
You brought up, some of the pieces that honestly, again, being privileged myself, and that didn't come to my mind as one of these reasons that this could be problematic, right? And in my mind, I was picturing, just from a learning perspective, that we get about 8 weeks off here in Ontario, this part of Canada. And the 8 weeks, it's like the idea of it and being from the classroom, being from the education system, I think we enjoy it probably more than the kids, necessarily enjoy it or need it in a way. It's like this idea of having all this free time. But the reality is, it's actually not that helpful. Like, summer gets old pretty fast. Like, you get pretty used to it, and I feel like those other breaks throughout the year could definitely be more beneficial, especially when it comes to this learning loss piece. But then, like you had said, Yvette, is like, what are we doing with our time throughout the summer? And what are the kids doing with their time throughout the summer? If it's not intentional, if it's not structured, it's likely not going to lead to anything very helpful or meaningful for them. So I too believe that, a full school year, even though like I would be sad to see summer go, like a full big break in summer, I would be sad to see it go. The reality is, I think it actually would be a better move. Again, hypothesis only, not data
Right.
researched here,
Like
but
it.
based on what we know about how the brain works and having been there and knowing those stretches you were talking about, Yvette, like if we could break up some of those longer stretches, especially here in Canada, we don't get like a Thanksgiving break like many school systems do. That can get like very long. And then the winter months as well can get very long, especially during, end of January into February.
Let's transition then into like what can we do coming into the end of the year? Like you said, Yvette, it's June. We know there's going to be an extended break here. We know that the data is saying that extended breaks, if we're not, say, making active or maybe even just like conscious or unconscious efforts for numeracy and math, say discussions at home, or sometimes that can go. They got that summer slide happening, come back into September. What can we do as educators for students in our classrooms to minimize, say, that summer slide? What are some of your moves?
Here in Ontario, I feel like, report cards are typically written by the second week of June, and we tend to have these last 2 weeks where, assessment and evaluation is complete. We're trying to keep students engaged. They're already 1 foot out the door. And I thought to myself, how could we leverage those 2 weeks to set up not only students, but families to establish almost like habits and routines that they could carry through the summer? So could we start every morning with a numeracy game and introduce a different numeracy game every day, and, have a dedicated time where we're going to play this, low prep but high impact game with students every morning? But I love the idea too, and I learned this from my experience teaching in summer learning, of inviting families into the classroom to play those games. Oftentimes families are welcomed into the school for an assembly or for some type of presentation where they're passive, where I would love in those last 2 weeks to open the doors during the day or even evening to offer an alternative for parents or caregivers who work to come in and learn some of these low prep, low material math games that would have a high impact for students over the summer. We recently talked about how that connection to like math is like a language, and the more we use it, the more fluent we become, and the more our brain is almost like primed to do that type of thinking. So if we could establish routines or structures that parents could easily adopt, where they're just dedicating 15-20 minutes every day to some type of routine that's going to keep students working on even just their fact fluency or their spatial reasoning throughout the summer, we could use those last 2 weeks of the school year to establish kind of that protocol or that routine.
I love it. And even for, let's say, parents that are, or guardians that are maybe unable to attend, whether it's during school, after school, or maybe unwilling or doesn't maybe value that opportunity, just by the students themselves being able to participate in all of those games, it's like at least the students have that sort of in their back pocket. And I'm picturing in my mind is that, if there's a handful of these games that you are utilizing in the classroom, is there, a little cheat sheet we can send home with the kids, right? So that they know, hey, here's kind of the rules, the basic rules of this game or whatever. See if anyone in your family wants to play with you. Maybe you bring it to, the uncle and aunt's house, or, the neighbor's house, or whatever it is, that at least someone is armed with this information. And you never know how far that can really go. And I think ultimately, these are those last few weeks where all school year we talk about how time is so precious before standardized tests, before report cards, before, not, checking off the list, the standard lists. What better way than to not only have some fun, keep the kids engaged, but then also arm them and their family with some ideas that they can pull out when, hey, maybe they go camping for a weekend in the summertime, or, again, they spend the afternoon at grandma's house and, they're looking for something fun to do. I love it.
Yeah. Me too. And one of the things I remember that when I think I was after my first year of teaching, I was like a summer camp counselor. And I remember I didn't plan out what the summer camp events would be, but I remember receiving as the counselor what our schedule was going to look like. And it was like a calendar. And then every day we had like on the actual calendar. So imagine like you print out your, a typical calendar, grid, and each day had like, you're doing this and then you're doing this, and it was like this type of activity and this type of activity, and it was like mapped out. So it's like you're doing the same thing on every day, but gave you ideas. And because I was the counselor, gave me the schedule to follow. But that, I remember just being excited to like see what I could do or what we were going to do for the summer, which was different than what we had been doing, all year as in classrooms, and seeing that and going like, let's dive in. I'm excited to kind of tackle this agenda that gives us ideas to work on, which, when I'm thinking about that and having like an activity calendar to send home to say like, we could be doing this, we could be doing this, here's a link to this, here's a link to that. And it's all of a sudden this like nice schedule. Cause I think parents like being maybe working throughout the summer, not having as much time, because I think families might be like, summer is very busy, but also we do need things to like fill slots and help us with that. So it's like, what is the thing? Like should we have like this schedule mapped out? Talk to us about,
Okay.
Yvette, have you done this in your
Yes.
class? Like I know that this schedule is always
She's
like
chomping at the
I'm
bit
so
here.
excited. Sometimes it's like you really tee me up for the right thing that I want to say right now. So 2 things. As a parent, I really need the teacher to be the one to send that home.
For sure.
Because my child is a absolute rule follower and he really wants to please people. But sometimes when it comes from me as the parent, if I'm the one who's saying we're going to do this activity on this day, or we're going to do this,
we're not, Mom.
Right. It's like my teacher didn't say I had to do that. Now I'm the only one who has to do that. So I love the idea that the teacher provides the list of optional, activities on some type of calendar, but I'm going to take it one step further. And I've been seeing memes all the time recently about like the Pizza Hut personal pan pizza for reading in the summer when we were kids.
Okay.
So there used to be like this incentive program when we were students. So when I was, 11, 12, 13, where it's like you could read so many books and you'd fill out your card and you'd take it to Pizza Hut and you'd get a personal pizza. And people have been saying like it's very nostalgic, but it was really motivating that there was this almost like you're working toward this accomplishment. So I wondered if we could tie your calendar idea to some type of like, I'm the teacher, I send home this calendar, but I say to the kids, like, bring your calendar back to me in September with initials on all of the activities that you did, or stamps, and then there's going to be some type of prize or compensation for your effort over the summer.
Yeah, no, I like that. I like that idea. Now, I had thought about that with my class, but then, what creeps into my mind is like the whole equity issue of like, we're providing this to kids, and then are we rewarding students whose families are dedicating time to making sure we complete that? And it's like, who brings those back? And it's like, we're reinforcing this, giving prizes to those, families. So yes, they're motivating, but then I worry about like, who am I actually rewarding here? And is that an equitable, say, experience for everyone while you're trying to provide incentive for people to do this?
So definitely, I think that's a great piece here, not to maybe, say that this idea can't work, but it's something that needs to be considered, right?
Yeah,
when
just
we
an
plan
idea
it.
to think
So
about.
I like that, keeping that top of mind. This idea is, I think the idea of the schedule is great. I think some teachers, though, I'm picturing that this time of year as well, right? They're like, oh, we just finally got to this place. And you're like, now I got to make this schedule, for example. Like, how many days are there in the, in the summer? Like, how much you get to decide what this looks like and sounds like. So again, don't overdo it. Don't, maybe in year one, it might be a 5-day schedule, like it might be literally just 5 days where, because guess what? You can repeat some of these things again if you wanted to. You get to do this and dip your toes in as little or, cannonball in as much as you want, but make sure it's energizing you, you're excited about it, and you feel the work is obviously worthwhile. The other piece is like, if you're going, this feels stressful, or I'm not sure, because I think the reason the activity calendar is so helpful for parents is a lot of times parents, not only like Yvette said, where, the kids are less motivated to do it for mom or dad or, their guardian, they're more likely to do it for the teacher. The parents are also wondering, like, what should I do? Like they're not really sure what they should be doing. Well, the teacher might feel the same way. Like you might be going like, what do I put on this calendar to make it worthwhile and to make sure everyone likes it? So I think a nice in between can be offering to the kids during this process as they're learning all these games and as they're, doing these things over the last couple of weeks of school, like actually creating a little bit of time and saying like, hey, like you make the activity calendar, like pick the games
like
that you want
choose
to
your own
play.
adventure, like pick and choose.
Exactly. And like put those down and maybe you compare them with, some of your friends, and heck, maybe you go on, on the computer and you go find some other games that we haven't looked at, like we can really make this where it becomes a little bit of the, student taking ownership and empowering them to sort of control a little bit of what this schedule might look like and sound like. Not only is it going to tell you a little bit about what it is they're liking and not liking, but it's also going to tell and inform the parents as well that maybe there's certain styles of games that, that they would rather play. Like for me, it would just be Monopoly all day long, every day. That's just all I would want to put in there. And my parents hated it, but they still played with me every now and again. But this way you can at least take a little bit of that the work off your shoulders. This doesn't have to be a teacher driven sort of activity that's being created. Let's get the kids involved and let's see what they might want to do over their summer break.
It reminds me of this book. I just pulled it off my shelf. Is not necessarily say the calendar idea, but it reminded me of like just the customness, the difference of like saying, let's build something that's a little, different than normal, working in games, working in different activities. Do you remember like, there was like a few years ago, I don't know if still it's like for certain age groups, maybe my kids may have just outgrown it, but it was a book called This Is Not a Journal. It's like, you know what I'm talking about? It was like this book, everyone, I don't know if everyone, but my kids, like it was like a big thing around when they were like 10, 11, maybe. And it was like a little book, but every page was like a different prompt, a different idea. Scribble on this page, or grab this page and crumple it up and throw it at your sibling. It was like every page had some sort of wacky, cool, creative, a combination, like grab a flower and paste it in here. You know what I mean? It was like these prompts to kind of like almost like a scavenger hunt type of book. It was called This Is Not a Journal. But a few years ago, I picked up this book, which is called This Is Not a Math Book. And it's the same kind of this. I'll put the link to it in the show notes. It is by it's called A Smart Art Activity Book by Anna Weltman. And in the book every page is like that in the same style, where this is not a journal, this is not a math book, but every page is very much like math and art combined, where, you're looking at like, make sure you grab your toolbox and it's got like your protractor. And then all of a sudden it's like, draw a circle through these 3 dots, and it's like showing you a little bit how, but then you're making circle art, or like, hey, here's this grid and you're going to make flowers, out of this kind of template. And it's like basically kind of combining these two things. But I always found the activities in here. We did this, like we had this during COVID. It was part of some of the activities we did during COVID because my kids were, that age around This Is Not a Journal. So I find that resource is like a fun idea in a way, kind of like the calendar, where it's creative. It's like something a little different, but maybe it's like, this is you can collect a couple activities like this, and it's a little booklet or package that goes home, more like journal like.
I love it. I love it. It sounds like, we've got a bunch of different ideas here. Of course, there's digital tools that we could be considering, right? The reality is, I know in my household, specifically with my son, he's a gamer. He likes the digital stuff. So it's like potentially saying, hey, listen, if there's some good math games that help with, fluency, or they help with problem solving, or whatever it is, to maybe incorporate that into a little bit of the schedule that, hey, listen, you're going to get X amount of tech time, but in order to get some, we'd like you to at least explore this activity. Now, the only negative of that is I don't like the idea of like putting math as sort of like you got to do it in order to do the fun stuff. Like that part I don't like. So you have to be cautious about how we do some of these things. We don't want math to become a chore. But at the same time, too, we do need students to recognize, and our kids to recognize, that we have to put some time and effort into something in order to get better at it. And I think that's true here with mathematics. We can all know, love, and trust mathematics, but not if we're never doing any of it, and not if we don't do it for long periods of time. So finding ways that you can incorporate just little bits into your day, thinking about some of the aspects. John, I think you did a great job too, of like thinking about like equity when it comes to the teacher trying to help families. How do we present opportunities, options, ideas without potentially causing any students to feel ostracized or left out? These are all things that we do struggle with, but ultimately I think just spending a little bit of time while we have this time now can go a long way to helping more students feel more confident in mathematics, and to feel like, we're doing something good here in these last few weeks, where sometimes you could feel like, your bag of tricks is getting a little bit empty trying to keep students engaged.
If you're not on our email list, get on over to our email list on makemathmoments.com, because then what we can do is make sure that you're getting some of these resources that we're talking about sharing here, and we'll make sure that you get those. But also, if you're on the email list, we want you to hit reply on an email that's sitting in your inbox. It's from Make Math Moments, it's from Kyle, it's from John, it's from Yvette. Hit reply and say, these are some of the ideas that I'm using right now to share into my communities, to my parents that I'm teaching. And we would love to kind of collect some of these ideas and share them back to the community. So hit reply, share your best practices for math ideas and math activities, math structures and strategies for at home throughout the summer. So we'd love to see those, and we'll be looking forward and sharing them back. Take care, everyone.